welcome to Untamed Minds, or welcome back. If you have been around and supporting me, I am so thankful that you're back here with us today. My name is Jessica, I am your host. And the reason why I started this platform, Untamed Minds, is because I feel like it is really important for us to spread awareness, especially about mental health within our Hmong community. I want to bring on, amazing guests to share their lived experiences because I feel like that's a way for us to open conversations, just normalize talking about mental health. So that's the reason why I have decided to continue and start this platform. So if you're new here, welcome, welcome. Thank you all so much for tuning in. For today's topic, I am bringing on a really important guest of mine who I feel like have a lot of essential life experiences that I feel like a lot of people can relate to. And I'm going to call this episode, Hmong Brother in Recovery. So if we all can welcome Kou Vang. We actually started, well, I knew Kou because we worked together and he's an amazing individual. So Kou, if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself, like a fun fact or just something fun that you want to share.
Okay, well, thank you, Jessica. It definitely is an honor to be a part of your movement, with your podcast and bringing more awareness to mental health, not just in general, but for the Hmong community. I think this is a topic that's not talked about enough, and if it is, it's being talked about not in a manner where we're finding any traction, right? So, which means that we can talk about these mental health topics, but at the end of the day, what are we really doing to solve these issues or these traumas that we go through, right, as individuals and as Hmong individuals too? I guess I'll talk about my story along the way too, and kind of some of the experiences that I've had. But yeah, it's definitely an honor to be here, and hopefully, all I can do is share my story, my strengths, and my hopes, with you guys, and if it impacts somebody, that's all that matters, right? As long as my story can inspire and motivate somebody to want to pursue recovery and find some healing and recover, healing in their lives too. That would mean a lot to me, because at the end of the day, that's all that we can do. I don't know. I ride motorcycles. I got a Ninja 650. God, what's a fun fact? I don't know. I feel like nothing too special. I mean, I love clothes. I love to wear nice shoes and nice. Um,
Yeah, I mean, those are fun facts. I mean, you're a pretty flashy guy with nothing to be ashamed of. And I also do want to mention, Kuhi is you're a founder of a Hmong nonprofit as well in lacrosse called Hmong to Hmong, where you guys do a lot of workshops, events for those who are seeking, support for recovery.
yes.
So if you are listening and from lacrosse, feel free to reach out to Ku. I'm so proud of him for the work that he's continued doing, especially for our Hmong community. So thank you so much for being here and for the service that you've done or are doing for our Hmong community. So before we dive into the questions for the topic, just a quick icebreaker question that I have for you. What is something you did recently that made you feel proud?
Oh man, I feel like all the work that I'm doing now, especially with Hmong to Hmong too, you know, so I run a support group and that we run here every Friday in lacrosse here. We run it at a center called the Kou Recovery Center, and it's open to the community, the center, and my group. But a lot of what I do in my group is that, like you already said, we do a lot of workshops and activities. But one of the important things that we do is we do a lot of volunteering. So we volunteer at a lot of other organizations too. So I mean, recently the Salvation Army Distribution Center in La Crosse here, they do a food drive every third week of the month. So whenever possible, if people want to join, we gather up as many people as we can, and we go down to either the food drive, the Salvation Army food drive, or we go to like the warming shelter this year too. I'll talk about that in a bit here too. But we went to the distribution center and just helped to give out food to families in need, that need food too. So it's like it's doing these human acts that really help you to just stay in perspective of like real life, right? Instead of being superficial, like how social media like portrays what life should be, seems to be like. It's doing things like that that really brings you back to the ground. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think volunteering is something that I do on the regular, but also what that I did recently that makes me feel really proud of myself. Not just me, but everybody that comes alongside me that does it with me too.
Mhm.
Not
Yeah,
not a one man effort; it's a team effort that
it
goes
really
into.
is, yeah. Mhm. Well, thank you for you and your team for continue to do that. I feel like we need more people like you, and you're so amazing, and, because of people like you, I feel like humanity and on earth is not dead, so thank you for the work that you do. I guess a little bit about myself. What is something I did recently that made me feel proud? Oh my gosh. I mean, I would say maybe just bringing variety of people onto my podcast. I think that made me feel proud about myself. This season especially, I decided to become more intentional with the people that I bring on and with a purpose, right? So that's something that made me proud. So thank you for sharing that and answering that icebreaker question.
Mhm.
So to dive into our topic, right? Just to kind of ease in, can you share me a little bit more about like your background and what life has was like for you as like a growing up as like a Hmong man?
Yeah, of course. One thing too is like the motto of my organization and my group is purpose driven recovery. You know, because it's when you're trying to find recovery, when you're trying to find healing, there has to be purpose involved. Without purpose, basically, it's like, why are we doing this, right? Without asking that question, a lot of times people get lost, right, along the way. And so they tend to lose motivation, or they lose interest in what they're doing because they're not really finding a goal or finding purpose in what they're doing. So, for yourself, like you just said, bringing people on, with intention and purpose, that's great because then you have an idea of what you want to do with your podcast. So I think that you're right on track with what you're doing too, and that's great. So I just want to praise you for that also.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, my story's not very different from a lot of other Hmong people. Let's see, my family came to the States in 89. So like it was about mid 89. My parents got sponsored by a church in Providence, Rhode Island. And at the time that's where my uncle, my dad's brother, had been sponsored and came to. So my dad's brother was already there first. And so my family got sponsored. I forgot what church it was, but if anybody knows Hmong history and how Hmongs came to the States, is that a lot of the families were sponsored by churches. After the war, that's how we got here, right? Anyways, my family came in mid '89. My oldest brother, Jer, was born. He was born in Laos, and then right after he was born, they came to the States. And then my sister was born in 1990, and the following year, I was born, 1991. So I'm a 91 baby. So I didn't necessarily grow up in Rhode Island. I was birthed there, but I was raised in La Crosse here. So it wasn't shortly after I was born that my family relocated to La Crosse here because like Hmong lúc nên chỉ như là được cá so like được cá đó like cái tí thế like if you have a brother or cousins that are living in a different area, you want to tell each other cá. So that's what my dad did, which was what brought us here to La Crosse. So I grew up in a pretty normal Hmong household. To be honest, I think a lot of trauma that I had throughout my life helped kind of is what caused me to suppress a lot of my childhood memories. So like I feel like part of my childhood has been suppressed, but through recovery and like healing, there are certain things that like trigger me to like kind of have a flashback and go, oh man, like I think a lot of people go through that. You know what I mean? Having parents that are immigrants and most parents that are minorities, it's tough because our parents came here with no education. Coming from a third world country into a capitalist country was a hell of a transition. My mom and my dad, they worked company jobs, nothing special, right? So obviously, I believe that my first primary language was Hmong. I think for a lot of us it was, except for maybe the newer generations. Like, I'm a father too, so you know, my kids' primary language is English, but I know for a fact that my primary language growing up was Hmong. You know what I mean? So, and I'm proud that I speak Hmong too, and I can understand Hmong. Yeah, growing up, pretty normal childhood. Living in apartments. Like those low end apartments. Nothing special. My
Yeah.
My parents weren't like necessarily smart, so like it's not like they could, they were like some of the other Hmong families were able to like find a store or start a business.
Yeah, but you gotta start somewhere, right? You gotta start somewhere. And like,
Or
and like I know like you said that like you brought up the fact that you experiencing some trauma as a child and that's why you suppress a lot of stuff from your childhood. Would you mind like just kind of exploring that a little bit and how that like affected you as you were growing up?
I think it comes in there's many different forms, right? So like it was forms of like how my parents disciplined me as a child. It was things that my parents went through, as I was growing up and I was alongside them. My parents got divorced when I was in fourth grade. So I was just about 10 years old, and then I seen kind of the downfall of their relationship, at that time, which that really caused a lot of stress on me and my siblings too. And when I was before my parents got separated, I was just a little bit younger. I had to have been about. See, the thing is that I try to reflect back into how old I was when this happened, but I can't really seem to remember the age I was. But I want to say that I was somewhere between like maybe 7 or 8 years old. So like my mom was going through a lot of mental health issues. So she had like some mental illnesses, and you have to remember this is like I want to say this was like early 2000s. For Hmong, lahat their mom like need to play like mahe, right? Well, she got possessed. Basically, that's what I'm trying to
Oh,
say.
okay.
She got possessed when I was younger because my mom's story is that before she met my dad, my mom was actually she was married, had a family, had a husband and kids too. Her husband and kids all died from diseases, so that impacted my mom, right? So like that brought in a lot of trauma for her, and so after my mom's first family had all passed away, that's kind of like like kiti mo my or like I think it was like from what I remember it's like my dad my yo mama.
It's a Hmong thing, yeah.
I've asked this story before, and so to summarize is that my dad my yo mama yeah. The person
Mhm.
made so so he just thought, oh, it's funny, so like joy, right? That's like how it was, in the monk community. It's like, oh, get married young, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
that was a trend that we all saw probably early on.
Yeah. I mean, like, my parents got married young. They weren't forced to, but then my mom was, like, 14 when she got married to my dad.
You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
but, like, how like, I'm interested in, like, how did that affect you as, like, their child?
Yes, right. So anyways, so my mom met my dad, but carry on throughout the years after me and my siblings were born. Um, my mom one day became sick, right? She became ill. So in Hmong terms, Nima possessed, but in American terms, she was having a lot of mental illnesses. And so, following the monk story of this, from my perspective, is that she basically what happened and what Toloning called mom was that nitu si toiwana nitu prijakala chokunemu. So basically, what it was saying that he was basically coming back to take my mom because somewhere along there they had made a promise to each other that if something happens or we're gonna be together forever, right? So the Hmong interpretation of that, it caused that possession to happen to my mom. So growing up, as I seen this going on, my mom got sent to the psych ward. She got sent to the psych ward, and so I remember as a kid, going to see my mom in the psych ward. And then I also recall a time too where my mom was like, she had somehow gotten the spirit of like Idu Jana. And so basically, some of the OGs were saying that my mom like started growing a little tail or something, like like things like that, right? Like monk yup, like yup, police, yeah. But anyways, so like there was just things that I saw like when I went to visit my mom in the psych ward. She came up to me and my siblings and like like she just did not look like herself at all. Like she was just like it was like it's like I didn't even know that that was my mom. That's what I remember thinking to myself as a kid. Like that doesn't look like my mom. You know. And then I remember her coming up to us when she saw us and like then she started like sniffing us like like what a tiger would do with their cubs and things like that. But then like then fast forward, I remember there was a time what happened was that my mom was like still really sick, so she was bedridden at this time, and so she was in bed one day, and then all of a sudden she started acting like she was getting choked up, like she was like, like so like I had my aunties there, and like there were some other OGs there, and basically, what they thought was that my mom's ex husband was like trying to take her soul. So I remember as a kid, they grabbed me as a kid, and they told me to come sit, and they grabbed me and put me on a chair, and then they tied itu it was like a they actually used itu what was it the things that they used to carry kids. I don't know what the Hmong name. I forgot the Hmong name for that. But
Đầy nheo.
yeah, the sheer the
Mhm.
I had one end of the string to to my mom's leg and attached the chair, and they made me sit in the chair.
So was that experience, like, traumatic for
It was
you as a child?
scary because like at that point I thought that my mom was dying.
Mm.
Like I grew up, it kind of fucked me up, like right, and so that kind of led to like a part of my journey and my addiction too, where like that instant, uh, when I was going through drug induced psychosis, that played a role in like my psychosis, and
Mm.
that's why like mental health is so important, right? Because it's the traumatizing events that go through our life that we somehow find a way to interpret, somewhere along the line. And if it's not dealt with in a healthy manner, or like in a manner where like you can find closure and move on, it snowballs into something that can cause more harm than it is, right? Anything more harm than it does helping, right?
Wow. I mean, like,
Yeah,
thank you for
I want to.
sharing
I
that.
got a lot of stories, dude.
I
A
know.
lot of, but it's like
Yeah, yeah.
because it's just like it's so important. That's why mental health is so important, right? Because there's
Exactly.
it's a domino effect of events in our lives that causes us to
Mhm.
get into certain situations or to interpret situations that it might not even be what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so, yeah, like, thank you for that was a wild story, but thank you for sharing that, and I can see why it was so traumatic for you, especially as, like, a kid, right? And so, like, you mentioned that you use, like, substances, can you tell us a little bit more about, like, how did, like, substance use or even, like, alcohol use, how did that affect, like, your mental health and overall, like, well-being, like, while you were using it versus, like, over time?
so my first substance use was definitely alcohol. It was at the same. It was. I'd have to say that I do recall like my first time using alcohol was when I was about 9 years old. And so like we lived in an apartment building, so there was like a bunch of Mika kids, Kidu kids, there was obviously older kids too running around, and so you being younger, you wanted to follow the older kids because they were cool. So I found myself as a kid at this little small house party that wasn't too far from where I was living. And, I found myself there, and they were smoking cigarettes and drinking Budweiser. I remember it was Budweiser too. That was like my first attempt at consuming alcohol as a kid. But then obviously, you know, experience is what I was chasing, right? At a young age, it's like you wanted to experience like what the cool kids were doing, or like what the cool things were. I guess I didn't. I guess my mindset of what like a normal life was for me was just like to do the cool things, right? I think a part of it comes from like as a kid, you know, I have four siblings now, but I have one half sibling, which makes it four. But growing up, I only had three siblings. I had two brothers and one sister. So like as a kid, I definitely, we grew up poor, so we didn't get a lot of attention, because my parents were worried about other things. You know what I mean? So like that impacted me as a kid to want to get attention from like other people. You know what I mean? So you know, my parents, not I'm not shaming my parents whatsoever, but obviously like their parenting style and tactics, was like you could give me a moon or like right. So obviously they tried to teach us right from wrong. That's because I remember the whoopings that and things like that. But it was because of my parents' parenting style that caused me to go and explore, right, and wanted to like you know find the attention of other people. because like my parents weren't really able to give that to me, you know. So that's what led me down my my path and my journey to experimenting with, you know, substances. And so, you know, that's what I mean, like how like my parents, you know, with parents not being able to pay enough attention to their kids can cause those kids to want to search for that outlet somewhere else. You know what I mean? So, and that's, you know, that's kind of like what happened to me, was that I wanted to find that experience somewhere else. And so my idea of my reality at the time as a kid was like, you know, hanging out with cool kids, you know, and like consuming substances because it seemed normal to me at the time.
Yeah, I mean, like, I hear you. You know, growing up, like my family, I feel like I lacked that attention from my parents too, right? And
Yeah.
like with, yeah, so similar to you, you started at the age of 9. That's the your first recall of like, using alcohol. For me, I was like 12, which fairly young too,
So,
but I agree with you. Like the reason why I took it was because I wanted to be cool with my cousins at the time who were like a lot older than me. And I mean, I got in trouble for it. I got in trouble for it, but I think that with me getting in trouble for drinking alcohol at the age of 12, it made me feel bad, but at the same time, good because I got that attention from my parents.
so you got
Not
in
that
trouble,
attention,
found out, right, that you were drinking,
because I was
or
drunk.
did by the cops, and then they told you, or
What was that?
did you get busted at a house party or something, or is that
No, no. So it was a family hangout, and we were just hanging out, and my cousins from Minnesota came over, so we were hanging out. We were like they were drinking, they're pressuring me to drink. I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna take it. Took it, like literally one can. Went home drunk as hell.
yeah,
you know, and like
yeah,
my parents smelled my breath, and they were like, "You were fucking drinking," and like that wasn't the type of attention that I wanted from them. But you know what?
yeah,
I got some sort of attention. And in a way, I feel like, wow, like they care about me. Yeah, like so just to hear your story, like I understand what you're saying because I feel like that's something that I went through too.
right. And that's, you know, and that's why generational trauma is like something that needs to be all addressed, right? When it comes to us overcoming and treating our trauma and PTSD, you know, we have to understand that our parents, you know, their generational trauma has been passed on to us. And for those that don't know what generational trauma is, you know, it comes in different forms, but it's like parenting. Let's just say, for instance, parenting styles. Parenting styles are passed down from generation to generation, right? So, like how your parents raised them and how their parents raised them, you know, it's passed down the line. So, like, you know, so like our, you know, our parents didn't have like these new, you know, parenting styles where like, you know, you teach them like proper discipline, or like, you know, like more healthy ways of like disciplining children, right, instead of like these extreme methods of like whooping them and like, well, most importantly, whooping your children, right? You know, like what can you mean like gay, or like, you know, belittle them, things like that. Like that all stems down from like, you know, your parents, and you know that's how they raised them. So like that kind of ingrained in them like how that's how they should be, that's how they should discipline their kids, you know. So like obviously maybe somewhere along the line your parents, you know, your parents, so your grandparents maybe were neglectful of your mom and dad or things like that, which
Right.
caused
Mhm.
you along, you know, your childhood too.
Mhm.
So that's why, like, you know, generational trauma is something that's passed down, but somewhere along the line it's like when you recognize like, yo, this is like, you know, like even the Vietnam War, it's like that's, you know, generational trauma that's passed down. Like it actually comes all the way down to like a DNA. It's like a gene, right? And so like this gene gets passed down along the line, and it's what causes also like, you know, like addiction is also genetic too. So so addictive
Mhm.
disease is passed down through generations too. So like for me, you know, my mom's parents were addicts. They were opium addicts, and so like, you know, when my mom birthed me and my siblings, you know, that genetic got passed on to us. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
back to the topic of transfer trauma though, but you know, it's like, so it's like learned behaviors that gets passed down, and so somewhere along the line, it's like you have to recognize like this is this is the trauma that my parents faced and they passed it down to me. But I recognize it now, so I'm gonna so then it stops here, and that's where like you have to find treatment. You have to find the proper avenues to heal from the generational trauma. So it's up to
Mhm.
us individuals to break that generational trauma, to heal that generational trauma, so that for those that come next after us, they don't have to. They can have a fresh journey, a fresh start from there.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, and like it is hard to break that generational trauma, but then the thing is that like yeah, it's very hard because it's a lot of you have to there's a lot of untangling that you have to do. How you have to go to the roots of like the causes of these generational trauma for you to stop it. You have to understand like why things happen, like why do my parents, you know, raise me the way they did? What can I
Mm-hmm.
do to stop it? It's a lot. But the thing is that like our generation now, we understand what that is. We are open to healing. So I think
Right.
that's the first step is acknowledging that like, yeah, I am a what is it like a victim of generational trauma. I
Yep.
do have some genes or some bad genes that I inherited from like my parents, like parenting style, and I can
Yeah.
do this and this just to stop it.
Yep.
So yeah, as long as you acknowledge it, then I think that's all that matters. And I know you mentioned was it kind of just going back to the topic of using alcohol at such an early
Yeah.
age.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Was there was there a time in your life where you were using alcohol like excessively, like to the point where you're like abusing it?
Yeah. I mean, so from my recovery story, my recovery is from what others consider like really hard drugs. So like
Mhm.
meth and heroin was my drug of choice. And my method of using was intravenously, so which means that I was using needles. And like so, my addiction and my form of using kind of, caused a lot of my, a lot of the traumas that I had too, because I was outcasted because I was using needles. And then so for some of my cousins that, were meth addicts, they were smoking, they were using bubbles or pipes, right? And so like and on top of that, being a heroin addict too, was like frowned upon by my cousins who were meth users. So like I like, during my addiction, I felt so much like I was outcasted because of that. You know what I mean? And so like you know, my addiction journey was definitely like a lonely and dark road that I walked. But like, of course it was experimenting with alcohol that like led me down that path, right? So like going to like family events, things like that, and then seeing like your cousin, like all your older cousins, like everybody there that's like consuming alcohol, right? I also remember as a kid too, like um, when my parents they used to like play pike, like they used to have house game, like house poker nights, and so they would have other OGs come there and they'd be playing cards and drinking too. And then as kids, we see that we think it's cool. So what are we doing? In our bedroom, what are we doing? We're sitting there, with sodas, pouring them to little cups, thinking that we're drinking alcohol, and then playing cards too, right? We're mimicking our parents. You know what I mean? So like, that's just like that's why it's so important. Like to as parents, it's really important. What we expose our kids to.
Mhm.
So like it's just things like that. But then like of course along the journey, experimenting with alcohol. I have to say that for me, alcohol was never really an issue for me, but like it was other forms. So like for me, it was like smoking bud, like smoking weed, marijuana, as you could say, right? It was that was more like my journey. It was like, it started with weed, and then I started getting interested in other drugs, like rolling, and then rolling turned to meth, right? And then meth wasn't really like something that I really liked, but it's just like because my cousins were doing it, I felt like, well, I need to do it too, to fit in, right? And so like that, that led me down to just like experimenting. And then I remember during my high school years was like when I got introduced to pain pills. So like hydrocodone, oxycodone, oxycontin. Um, I really started dabbling when I was in high school. And the thing is that when I was in high school, dude, I actually I'm lucky that I even graduated high school, right? So I'm class of 2010. I graduated with like literally like a 0.02 GPA. For me, like in the small part of town that I was living in was called Holman, and so they had this little small leadership school in another town called Galesville. Oh, Trempealeau. So no, it was Galesville. Yeah, Galesville, and that's where I went. And there was two really cool teachers that were there, and by the grace of God, they passed me. And to be honest, I like if I would have followed the traditional method of high school and the classes, I never would have graduated. I should have never graduated. But anyways, I remember going to my graduation with a pocket full of pills and and just drugs on me. You know what I mean? So like I was selling and using all throughout like a good through at least halfway through like my high school years. So which was like from about my sophomore year to my senior year. So like that was kind of like the crowd that I hung out with because for me, like I had a mix of friends. Like I had Hmong friends and Mika friends. But then like I guess for me, my journey was that I hung out a lot with more white kids than I did with Hmong kids. So you know that was kind of like what the white kids were doing. They were doing like pink pills, right? So you know, following my high school years and then after graduation, you know, was when I met my first kid's mom. And then I got her into using pain pills too, and it was just a vicious cycle, right? And then it snowballed, and then it got to a point where like, we were like we were pawning things. Like I was, like we'd steal money too, of course, right? Like we find things just to feed our habit, our addiction. And once um, the pain pills just kind of got to a point where there wasn't enough, and that's when I found heroin. And then like because heroin was a little bit better than pain pills, a little bit stronger, a little bit cheaper, a little bit no at the time it wasn't that cheap. Like it was pretty expensive too though. But like it was stronger than pain pills. You know what I mean? So being an opiate addict, you kind of want that like that big. It's like a down feeling. You know what I mean? It's almost like relief from like all the stresses and
Yeah.
bad
It's like
things, and
a comfort zone for you, basically.
and that's kind of like where it was over with for me. And I went down just kept going downhill ever since.
First of all, thank you for your vulnerability. I know it's a lot to just kind of have you talk about it. And just for the folks who are out there who are probably, dealing with the same thing, just so you know, like I just want to make sure you guys are not alone in your journey. But a question that I do have for you, Ku, is that you took us down the road of your journey, your dark path. So thank you for that. And when did you realize that, you needed that help or like you needed to recover from your addiction? And like, how did that recovery journey look like for you?
Mine is I guess to put it in a way, like it really involved like the intervention of like a lot of different parties, right? So I got to a point where my addiction led me to getting arrested. So of course, like having to go to jail and things like that, right? Having probation officers, but it's like at that time too, though it wasn't enough, right? Like I was stuck in this cycle that I didn't understand. Like even like during my times, like we knew that like you think to yourself like, oh man, like I know that I need to stop using, but then it's like you don't have that enough of that awareness to actually get help, right? You don't have, and you don't really want help because you're stuck in this vicious revolving door. You know what I mean? I guess for those that don't really understand what addiction is um, like just imagine yourself. I've heard this analogy before, but it's like imagine you go for a run and then you come back, and then when you're done with running and you realize I'm super thirsty, and then and so what do you do when you're thirsty? You want to go find something to drink, right? To kind of to suppress that thirst, right? So that's like addiction is like being so thirsty that like you need to find something to quench it. You know what I mean? And if you can't find something to quench it, you'll basically go to the extent and to the lengths to get whatever it is you need to quench that. You know, it's really dark and deep. You know, so yeah, I got to a point where I was just in this vicious cycle, like just kind of in and out of jail, and like I'm thankful that my older brother Jer, he's a major player in like my recovery too because he tried to help me too along the way. Like he tried to give me the professional help that I needed. But at that time I had no desire to stop using. I wanted to continue to live the lifestyle, and I know that there's a lot of people out there who are still living that lifestyle, and you know think they can't escape it. But I'm telling you that through time, through recovery and treatment, and the right support systems, that recovery is definitely possible. And at the end of the day, it is true, we do have a choice.
Hmm.
Also, my brother, helped. My brother was a big pillar in my recovery too. But it was the vicious cycle, like constant in and out of jail, right? And so at the time, I thought that like the white folks, like the POs and things like that, were always out to get me, and like trying, like why are they doing this to me, right? Like I feel because obviously being a minority, you always feel like a victim. You know what I mean? Like there's not a time where like I walk into a grocery store and I don't feel awkward. Like even though like we're Americanized, like isn't it sad that we have to walk into like a room full of like you walk into a room full of white people, like you're always feeling like kind of awkward, right? It's like
An outcast, yeah.
yeah, you have to feel like that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But so like that's kind of like that's that victimization mindset. Like uh,
Internalized racism, what I talked with Cassandra about.
she's actually the one that brought that to my attention. But yeah, anyway, so it really took the intervention of like like I said, many parties. So like which was I'm thankful that my family was still involved. In trying to help me, but it also took like the judicial system. So which means like the courts, the POs. I would have to say that it was definitely also myself too, though, right? Because obviously, when you get to a point where like you just kind of like I'm sick of living this way. You kind of come to that realization. You're like, man, I need to like do something about it. It was just a mix of like people that were willing to support me and want to see me live a good life and wanted to see me thrive that led me to find the recovery that I have now. So and I guess for me, there was kind of like I went through a small epiphany, which kind of like what kind of motivated me to find the recovery too. So for any of the brothers and sisters who are in addiction or like not it doesn't have to be just hard substances, but even alcohol too. Like there is hope, but at the end of the day, it's like you have to find a personal reason to want to recover. That's why like
Mhm.
for my group is purpose driven recovery. It's like if we don't do things with purpose, then we're always gonna feel lost. Like we're always gonna feel like these things are pointless, right? And for me, I wanted to be successful. Like I wanted to be a good son. I wanted to be a good father. I wanted to be a good brother. A good brother too. So it's like it's just these realistic things that really drove me to want to recover and to find the recovery that I needed for my addiction. And so I highly encourage the brothers and sisters who are still suffering that there is hope. But at the end of the day, you have to make it personal. Like your recovery has to be personal. And whatever it is, whatever journey, to recovery that it is, that's your story, right? Unfortunately, the truth is that for some brothers and sisters, they might have to keep going in and out of jail. They might have to keep getting in trouble, even go to prison to come out and actually find the recovery that they need, to find the treatment that they need from all of that bad shit that has happened throughout their life. But like, I want my story and I want like my experiences to be that, that prime example of like that there like recovery is possible, right? Like you can come out from the depths and overcome and be successful. you have to have purpose in what you do. That's why it's so important to me just to do the things that I do now. I want to succeed not just for myself, but for my kids, for my family. Like who doesn't have the dreams of wanting to retire their parents or like buy a house or a car for their siblings, things like that. You know what I mean? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for, just for your kind words. And I
It's
feel
just
like
go on like all night, but
I know you. But like, just hearing you, like I feel so inspired already. So, again, like thank you for sharing your kind words. And definitely kind of like what Ku said, like you have to want to recover for that to happen, right? Like if you don't want it, it's never gonna happen. You have to want it bad. And obviously, the journey to recovery, it's not going to be an easy one. If it's an easy one, everybody will be recovered. So it
right.
is going to be a hard one. So obviously, Ku, with your own personal recovery journey, have you ever went through any like challenges that kind of made you doubt yourself? And like, how did you overcome that?
Yes, definitely, I did. I'd say early in like the early stages of my recovery, there was professional help, right? And I was, for a lot of the others, their journey is different, can be different. Like their journey to recovery and healing and and closure is different. Not everybody's path is the same. But as long as you still have the goal of like, I want to overcome, I want to heal, like I want to move forward, you know, that's possible. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like as we
Yeah,
do,
like everyone has the same goal, but there are different paths to reaching that same goal. And yeah, I mean like what Ku said, like the path for Ku may not work for you. And that's okay. Like you gotta find the path that works for yourself and it's gonna look different. So don't feel defeated if the path for somebody else does not work for you.
yeah. And so like back to the topic of like my my journey to recovery too is that like it really took the like it really took the help of professionals too. Like so I went to rehab, I did counseling and therapy. At first it was a struggle because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand, like I was like, why am I going to these fucking meetings? Like why am I these things are pointless, right? I didn't understand like what the goal of like my counselor was, or like with even rehab, right? Like at that time I was kind of clueless as to like why am I even doing, like I knew that like, oh yeah, like I have to stop like using drugs, but it's like I didn't have a full understanding of like why I needed to stop using drugs. And the tough thing for a lot of us Hmong brothers and sisters is that we're very skeptical of like professional help, right? So it's like, when you get to a point when you're like, well, professional help is not like, I don't need it, right? Because somewhere along the way of your journey in life, you learn to cope with the things that you went through. Like you either learn to just close it up, shove it in a box, and just store it far away from you, and you move on, right? But then like you never really find that closure because somewhere along the way, something opens it up, and then it comes back to life, and then you're struggling again, right? And the thing with like counseling and therapy too is that like it helps you to come to understand why it is you went through that. It helps you to find closure in these things, and it's like with understanding and like it's mostly with understanding like why you went through these things that helps you to accept it and to move on, to move forward, and to grow in life. That's exactly what happened with me with counseling and therapy, is that it helped me to find the answers that I needed. And a lot of times it's like you kind of knew the answers already, but you didn't want to accept them. Like with a good counselor, with a good therapist, they help you to tap down into the roots of your issues, and they help you to find ways to heal it, and more healthier ways to cope with these things so that you can continue to live and thrive in life. Yeah, the brothers and sisters who are skeptical of treatment, like just know that, whoever it is that you go see, like they have your best interests at heart, right? They want to help you heal. They want to help you overcome. They want to help you to recover. You just have to be, you just have to be willing and go there with optimism and with an open heart and say, I want to heal, right? And so help me to guide me along my journey so that I can overcome and I can thrive in life. my Hmong Hmong, I run a support group too. So like, you still see a lot of people come in that are still struggling from addiction. And it's like, as much as I can extend a hand to help them, at the end of the day, if they're not willing to accept the help and they're not willing to help themselves, I can only do so much. And so it goes to the question is like, at what point do you feel like you're ever going to be ready? Are you ever going to be ready to find the treatment or find, the counseling, the therapy, or like find the closure that you need, the answers that you need, right? Does it have to go to an extreme for you to really realize like I need to find a way to help myself? And that's usually the answer for a lot of people. Is like you get to a point where you're like, I'm fucking sick of this. I can't deal with this anymore. Like I need to do something about it, right? That's usually a lot of the outcomes for people to eventually open up their mind and their hearts to actually find the help that they need.
While your recovery journey, it sounds so like relieving for you. And I'm glad that like, you found that support system that you need to feel liberated and grow and, kind of just stop your old ways. So obviously, with you taking us on your journey to recovery, how has that like changed your life? Like how has recovery overall changed your outlook on life? And like how do you maintain to be mentally and physically healthy like today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To answer and summarize the answer to that question, the best way to say is like I've become more accepting now. More importantly, I've learned humility, and for those that don't know what humility means, it's like admitting that you have an addiction or like you have a problem. Because once you own that and you say it proudly, like I'm not afraid to say it, I'm a heroin addict and a meth addict, right? There's no shame in that. And that's like where you learn humility. Or like you own your flaws. That's humility. And like it's so freeing, like you said. It's freeing, and it's you're accepting of your situation. Nowadays I'm not afraid to be vulnerable because I know that I can overcome, right? It comes from like a will of wanting to survive. I guess, like I said, to summarize, it's just you learn humility, acceptance. Um, you learn to love yourself again, and when you love yourself, man, I can tell you that a lot of other people's opinions about you doesn't really matter.
It makes me so happy and proud of you to just hear you talk about that. Cause like loving yourself is a huge one. Like not a lot of people know where to start. Like even me, I'm still on my journey to loving myself. So it's it's a long one for sure, but it's worth it. And I agree, once you learn how to love and accept every single flaw that you know about yourself, people can try their best to drag you down, but they can't because you're basically untouchable at that point. Like you
Right.
don't give a fuck what people gotta say. Like their
Own it.
opinions are irrelevant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because you own your flaws, right?
right.
Um, One of the important lessons that I've learned too, that it follows like humility too, but it's like it's a lot of times, the reason why we struggle to overcome or we struggle to find closure or like find recovery is because we feel like our circumstances are so unique, right? And when you get to a point where you're like, oh man, like my circumstances are so unique that nobody understands me, then you're close when you give yourself that space to say my situations are unique. You close off any chances of those that want to help you, or like for anything that wants to heal you. You're closing off all the doors for it. You're basically boxing yourself off, and you're giving yourself barriers. It's that thought of like it's and when I say humility too, it's because when you realize like my situations are not that unique, then you're willing to let others come in to be compassionate with you, to empathize and sympathize with you. You're letting those doors open, and you're letting the chances of recovery and healing come to you. It's true though. It's like I was at that point too in my life where I was like, man, my situations are unique. Like my addiction is unique, and nothing can be understanding of you. you're kind of just like you're stuck there, like you're stunted. You know what I mean? And like
Mhm.
those that come and try to water you, help you to grow, like you're they don't know how to help you because you're so unique.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying because I feel like when a person is in that situation, right, they feel like not a lot of people can understand them because they know themselves. Like they understand themselves. They think that other people who have not experienced it would never know. But the thing is, people who love you and want to support you, they don't have to understand you to support you, right? They just have to listen to you and,
Right.
support you in the best way that they can. And kind of like Ku said, he brought up a really good point of once you start letting your barriers down, people that's when you will allow people to come and, care for you and help you with your recovery. And
Mhm.
that's when you realize that like, wow, I have a lot of people who actually loves me.
Yeah.
And then that also opens a door to you wanting to love yourself. So I think
Yes.
that's really important for you to bring up. So thank you for that.
Right. Yeah. Good
Yeah.
stuff.
Good summary. Yeah. So like the last question that I do have for you is, just in terms of like your hope for the for the community, right? What are your hopes for the future, for yourself and for the community, just other folks who are dealing with addiction and their own mental health challenges too?
So my long-term goals, right, is to push my organization. Obviously, it's important to start where I'm at, right? So which means like helping my community first, and those around me here. But my long-term goals is to eventually just push a movement of hope and recovery to others in different states and different counties too. I think for me, the movement is purpose, right? Like just helping others to find purpose in their life. It's really fulfilling to see like somebody come to you in shambles, in a mess, right? They're in a mess, and and you have the tools to help them become whole again. That's the thing too. It's like through my life experiences, my lived experiences, I've gained tools. I've gained tools to help me to cope with my daily struggles, with my daily anxieties or stresses, right? The thing about the recovery and healing is that you learn and you gain new tools, and these tools help you to overcome these challenges that you face moving forward. I can continue to give other people tools so that they can fill up their toolbox so that they can overcome whatever challenges that they face on a daily basis, or that what they're currently going through now. And so for me and my organization, we're just hoping just to be another pillar of hope and support for the community. One important thing and one aspect about my organization too is that we not only support just the Hmong community, but we're open to the whole community as well. More importantly, though, we would love to support the minority, people of color, because the BIPOC community, they continue to face challenges even in today's standards of society. We do. It's true. We need more Hmong counselors. We need more Hmong therapists, psychologists, more Hmong doctors. Like right, just more Hmong people involved, or just more of the BIPOC community involved in this kind of work. Because at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is we're trying to give others hope too, to know that there is always a better today, right?
Yeah, no, like I also want to mention like the reason why, I feel like it's really important for you to start within your community is because I feel like representation is so crucial. Like
Yeah,
you have to, for like as a Hmong person, I would not know how to advocate for another person, another who is not like Hmong, another person who's not Hmong, because there's a lot of cultural barrier there, right? So you have to
yeah,
start within your community first before you can branch out and help other people who
right.
are in the same situation as you or have the same purpose as your organization. So I'm glad that you're able to start your Hmong to Hmong organization and be that pillar for our Hmong community, and also the fact that you're open to helping other BIPOC community members as well. I think that's really beautiful, and I want you to continue doing your work. And I follow you on Facebook, your Facebook page, so I see all the updates, and
Yeah,
every time there's an update, I get so excited and I'm so happy. I do want to come join, but then you're all the way in lacrosse, man. That's so far.
I know. I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
thank you for that. It's just,
yeah.
yeah, the work here will never end. And I don't mean to say that in a bad way, right? But like the battle continues, not just for myself, but just to fight for others to have a better today and tomorrow, right? Yeah, at the end of the day, I'm still trying to fight not just for for myself to have a better life too, but just letting my again back just letting my story be a pillar of hope for others too. Man, I have obviously my journey can't be summed up in an hour and a half, right? But my journey is not as different as others, and in a way, for any Hmong brothers and sisters who want to have the life that they've always wanted, like it's possible for you, right? Obviously, I'm not exactly where I want to be, but I know for myself, I'm working towards that. Like just about a year ago, I didn't think that I would be able to do start Hmong to Hmong, right? And it's not just me though, but because Hmong to Hmong consists, of me, um, my guy Michael Vu, and his brother Roger too. Like, and that's the thing is like we can't do these things alone. You know what I mean? Like that's why I understand Hmong is so important because Hmong is about family, right? You know what I mean? It's like it's everybody that comes along with me that fights alongside me. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I definitely want to give a shout out to my brother Michael and Roger too. For uh, you know being in this fight with me to push for a better today for others and to be that pillar of hope for those that want recovery and want to heal and move forward in their lives.
Yeah. Shout out to Roger and was it Michael? Shout out to them and Koo too. I'm very excited to, just hear more and know what you guys have and, the future plans you guys may have for Mong to Mong. So again, thank you so much for just sharing your recovery story with us and how everything started. And obviously your vulnerability, as I know sometimes this may be a really tough topic to talk about, but like you said, it's very important. It's a topic that not a lot of people within the Hmong community are comfortable talking about. So thank you for being on here and talking about that today. So to kind of conclude this, I do have a quote that I want to read off. It's by Brain Brown, who is a researcher and author who speaks on vulnerability and mental health. And it says, shame corrodes the very part of us that believes we are capable of change. Owning our story and loving ourselves through the process is the bravest thing we will ever do. So I think that's a really good quote to kind of tie everything together. So before we end, I just want to ask, any last remarks that you may have, Ku?
This whole podcast, and just the things that I said too. Everybody's journey to recovery is different, but we all share the same goal, and that's to recover, and that's to have a good life again, to thrive, right? To overcome our challenges and barriers that we have. And the most important thing too is that just know that you don't have to fight alone, right? I'd say that for me, it takes a stronger person to reach out than it is for somebody to do something by themselves. I know that there are a lot of people who are on their journey that feel alone, but I promise you that there's somebody and people out there that are willing to open their arms and allow you to come in and receive you and help you. I think that the thing too is just you have to take that step, right? Like you don't have to go to extremes in your life anymore. Like so you don't have to find yourself at a point of like having to go to jail or prison to seek the help that you need. I just highly encourage anybody that wants to recover or that desires a better life to continue to fight for it. Do everything with purpose. Have a goal in mind, right? And the goal, whatever it is that you choose to do, but do it and do it with purpose.
Thank you for your last remarks. Kind of like what Ku said, take the first step, even if it's a little step, that's progress. So if you've been tuning in till now, thank you so much for, staying with us. I hope you, learned a thing or two from Ku's experience and story. And, obviously, Ku, I'm so proud of you again and
Thank
so
you, Jeff.
thankful and yeah and like grateful that you were willing to come on here to talk to us about your experiences. So, just wanted to remind everyone to the audience, thank you so much for your continued support as well. You can feel free to follow me on Facebook, Spotify, or YouTube. Otherwise, goodbye, everyone. We will see you next time, and I hope to have you guys tune in again. Okay, bye.